Imagine a world where a single ruler holds not only the fate of an empire, but the divine power to shape the very fabric of existence. A world where gods walk among men, and the boundary between the living and the dead is as thin as a breath. This was the world of the Pharaohs, rulers who were not merely kings but gods on earth, whose every decision carried the weight of eternity. They were the mediators between the gods and humanity, responsible for maintaining cosmic balance, leading armies to victory, and building monumental legacies that would echo through time. From the moment Egypt was unified under the visionary Narmer to the building of the Great Pyramids, these pharaohs constructed not only colossal structures, but a society that would thrive for thousands of years. Their reigns were marked by divine power, political genius, and remarkable accomplishments that shaped the ancient world. But there's more to their story. Hidden truths, fascinating rituals, and the mysteries of their afterlives that still captivate us today. Wherever you're tuning in from, feel free to drop a comment. It's always nice to hear from you. If you'd like to hear more stories like these, subscribing is a great way to stay connected. Get cozy. It's time to let your mind wander, whether you're winding down to sleep or simply enjoying the calm. It's truly great having you here. Let's dive in. Long before the mighty pyramids cast their shadows over the sands, before the golden face of Tutankhamun was discovered, and before Egypt became the land of the pharaohs, there was a time when Egypt was divided. A land split in two, with Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. The land was a patchwork of rival kingdoms, each with its own culture, its own gods, and its own way of life. For centuries, these two powerful regions existed side by side, but they remained apart, separated by more than just geography. The rivalry was not merely political. It was spiritual. The people of Upper Egypt worshipped their crocodile god, Sobek, while the people of Lower Egypt revered the cobra goddess. Wajet, two kingdoms, two gods, two identities, and no intention of merging any time soon. Yet, as with all great stories, change was coming. In the heart of Upper Egypt, a new ruler was rising, a king with a vision far beyond the borders of his own kingdom. This king was Narmer, later known as Menes, and he saw the potential of a united Egypt. Narmer was no ordinary king. He was a visionary, someone who recognized that Egypt's future lay not in division, but in unity. To the people of the time, it might have seemed impossible, even heretical, to merge two such distinct lands and cultures. But Narmer knew that only by uniting Upper and Lower Egypt could the kingdom become truly powerful, truly prosperous. The challenge before him was monumental. How could he, a ruler from the south, convince the people of the north to accept him as their leader? How could he merge two deeply entrenched identities, each tied to different gods and traditions, without destroying the rich culture of either? The road ahead was filled with uncertainty. Narmer was not just up against an army of warriors. He was up against centuries of cultural and religious divides. The stakes were high. A failure to unite the lands could mean years of conflict, division, and chaos. But Narmer had something that few before him had, an unshakable belief in his divine mission. He was not only a king, he was the living embodiment of the god Horus, a divine being chosen to unite the land and bring order to chaos. This wasn't just a military conquest for Narmer. It was a calling from the gods themselves. His belief in the divine right to rule was not just a matter of politics. It was the very foundation of his power. As Narmer's forces marched northward, the tension in the air must have been palpable. The ground vibrated with the thrum of his army's march, the rhythm of their steps as steady as the beat of a drum, heralding the arrival of change. And yet, as the soldiers advanced, Narmer would have known that the true battle was not just fought on the battlefield. The true battle was within the hearts and minds of the people. Could he convince the northern kings and their followers to lay down their swords and accept his rule? Could he convince them that unity was the only way forward for Egypt's future? The answer to these questions would shape the course of history forever. When the battle finally came, it was fierce. Narmer's forces clashed with the armies of Lower Egypt, and the battlefield became a symbol of the kingdom's future. The sky must have seemed to darken as the war drums echoed across the land. And yet, despite the chaos of battle, Narmer held his ground, a symbol of divine strength and determination. The clash of swords and the clash of cultures were felt in every strike, but in the end, Narmer's forces triumphed. His vision, his conviction, and his divine right had carried the day. But the true victory was not in the defeat of Lower Egypt's forces. It was in the symbol of unity that Narmer forged that day. After the battle, the moment of unity arrived. Narmer did not just declare himself king of Upper Egypt. He declared himself ruler of all Egypt, as the Pharaoh. And it wasn't just the sword that made this possible. It was the merging of two crowns, one red and one white, the symbols of Upper and Lower Egypt. These crowns, once worn separately by two rival kingdoms, were now unified in Narmer's hands, symbolizing the merging of the two lands into one powerful, unified kingdom. This wasn't just a political move. It was a symbolic act, one that forever sealed Narmer's legacy as the first pharaoh of Egypt. This unification was immortalized in one of the most powerful symbols in Egyptian history, the palette of Narmer. This ceremonial stone, carefully carved and intricately designed, captured the very moment of Egypt's rebirth. On one side, Narmer is shown triumphantly striking down his enemies, the image of military conquest and strength. On the other, Narmer wears the crowns of both Upper and Lower Egypt, an unmistakable symbol of the land's unity under his rule. The palette wasn't just an artifact. It was a statement. It declared to the world that Egypt, divided for so long, was now united under one divine ruler. Narmer had not only triumphed on the battlefield, he had triumphed in the hearts of his people, uniting them in the name of a shared future. The unification of Egypt under Narmer was more than just the creation of a single kingdom. It was the birth of a divine monarchy. From that moment forward, the pharaohs would be seen as not just kings, but as living gods, the physical embodiment of Horus, carrying out the will of the gods on earth. Narmer's vision for a united Egypt would lay the foundation for the greatness that was to come. The birth of the pharaohs marked the beginning of a new era, one of divine power, one of unity, and one of unparalleled cultural, architectural, and political achievement. Egypt had been united, and its future was bright with the promise of prosperity, power, and glory. And so, Narmer's name was etched into history, not just as the first king of Egypt, but as the first pharaoh, a god-king who united the land of the Nile and set Egypt on the path to greatness. His victory would resonate through the ages, a shining beacon of what was possible when divine will, vision, and leadership came together to change the course of history forever. Pharaohs were not just rulers of their people, not merely kings sitting on thrones in distant palaces. They were far more than that. Imagine a figure so powerful that their very presence was seen as a direct link between the heavens and the earth. In the land of Egypt, the pharaoh was not just a man. They were the living embodiment of Horus, the great sky god. To the people, the pharaoh was not just the ruler of the land. They were a god walking among them, chosen by the divine to rule and protect Egypt. Every step the pharaoh took was seen as the will of the gods themselves, a godly action in the mortal world, a divine decree that shaped the fate of the kingdom. It wasn't just about kingship, it was about divinity. This belief was powerful and unshakable. The pharaoh did not only command armies or issue decrees. They commanded the very forces of nature. They had the power to make the Nile flood at the right time, to ensure the crops grew, to protect Egypt from invaders, and to lead the people in worshiping the gods. Imagine the weight of such responsibility. To the people, their pharaoh's will was not just law. It was the law of the gods, and breaking that law meant defying the divine order itself, inviting chaos into their lives. This divine connection cemented the Pharaoh's authority, for who could defy a god? The Pharaoh's reign was seen as sacred, with no room for doubt. Their power was not just political. It was spiritual, unassailable. A Pharaoh's actions were dictated not just by political needs, but by divine will. Their daily duties weren't merely those of a king. They were the actions of a god-king, someone who ensured the cosmic balance of Ma'at, the universal truth and order that kept Egypt and the world functioning in harmony. To maintain Ma'at was to keep everything in the universe running smoothly, ensuring Egypt's prosperity and protection from evil. The Pharaoh was the protector of this divine order. When they sat on their throne, they were seated as both a ruler and a god, as Horus himself would have sat in the heavens. But what did it mean to be the embodiment of Horus on earth? It meant that the Pharaoh was not only the head of the political and military structure, but was also the chief priest, the high spiritual leader, the very mediator between gods and mortals. They didn't just wear a crown. They wore the uraeus, the sacred cobra, a symbol of divine protection that struck terror into the hearts of enemies, and assured the people that the Pharaoh was their guardian. A simple glance at the Pharaoh's attire, their crown, their symbols, and the people knew they were in the presence of a divine being. There was no question, no uncertainty about their role. In this way, pharaohs combined the roles of political leader, military commander, and spiritual protector. Three facets wrapped into one divine figure. A pharaoh did not simply lead his army into battle. They led as a god. Every military campaign was not only a defense of the land, but also a divine act, a demonstration of Horus' might. Victory wasn't just a triumph of arms. It was a triumph of the gods. And if a pharaoh lost, it was seen as a failure in the divine mandate. The pharaoh's connection to the gods ensured that even in times of war, they were never alone. They were guided by divine forces that made their reign sacred. Every pharaoh understood that their legitimacy came from the gods, that their power to rule was granted not by the people, but by divine right. They were expected to keep the gods pleased through their actions, whether it was by making sacrifices, leading religious ceremonies, or overseeing monumental building projects to honor the deities. Temples were not simply architectural feats. They were embodiments of divine power, built to honor the gods and reflect the pharaoh's place in the cosmic order. Each building, each pyramid, each monument was a testament to the pharaoh's divine rule, their ability to connect the mortal and divine worlds. Yet, while the pharaoh's power was divine, their duty was earthly. They had to ensure the land was protected, the people were fed, and Egypt's borders were secure. They had to lead not only in worship, but in the day-to-day affairs of governance. Despite their divine status, the pharaoh could not afford to be disconnected from the people. They were both a king and a god. But they were also the protector of Egypt, the caretaker of its future, the steward of its vast lands. This made their role unique and essential. The pharaoh's life was one of constant balance, walking the line between divine duties and mortal responsibilities. They could not afford to be too distant from the people or the land, but they also had to maintain an aura of divine authority, one that could not be questioned. Every act, from the smallest ritual to the grandest conquest, was a reflection of their divine mission. Every decision they made echoed in the heavens, shaping the fate of Egypt and its people. A pharaoh's reign was an ongoing act of divine service, never fully his own, always tied to the gods, ensuring that Egypt remained strong, prosperous, and protected under the gaze of the gods. To be a pharaoh was to be both a leader and a divine force, to be mortal and godly, to bridge the gap between the heavens and earth, and to make sure the people knew that the gods were with them, always watching, always guiding. One of the most important aspects of a pharaoh's name was its connection to the gods and the symbolism it represented. The pharaoh's name was often composed of two parts: the Horus name, the throne name, and the nomen, the birth name. The Horus name symbolized the pharaoh's divine right to rule and their connection to Horus, while the nomen was typically a personal name given at birth, but later used to solidify their legacy and divine role. Both names were often surrounded by the famous cartouche, which gave them divine protection, ensuring that the pharaoh's name would endure for all eternity. Let's dive into some of these names and their profound meanings. Narmer, also known as Menes, is credited with uniting Upper and Lower Egypt and founding Egypt's first dynasty. His name is particularly powerful because it symbolizes his role as a unifier. The name Narmer means fighter or striker, reflecting his military prowess and his ability to unify Egypt under his rule. His name also represents his status as the living embodiment of Horus, which gave him divine authority over both the southern and northern lands of Egypt. His Horus name solidified his role as the protector of Egypt, which is significant because the pharaohs were seen not only as rulers, but also as divine guardians of the land. Thutmose, one of the great pharaohs of the 18th dynasty, is remembered for his military exploits and the expansion of Egypt's influence. His name, Thutmose, is derived from the Egyptian god Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and knowledge. The name itself means born of Thoth and indicates a direct connection between the pharaoh and the god, signifying that his reign was blessed with divine knowledge and wisdom. This name was symbolic of the pharaoh's intellectual and spiritual leadership, as the Egyptians believed that the pharaoh, as the embodiment of a god, was a leader who also guided the people in wisdom, not just in war. Ramses II, known as Ramses the Great, is one of the most famous pharaohs in history, remembered for his long reign and remarkable achievements in battle and architecture. His name, Ramses, means Ra is the one who gave birth to him, or born of Ar-Ah. Ra, the sun god, was the chief deity in Egyptian religion, representing life, light, and power. The use of Ra's name in his title reinforces Ramses' divine connection and power as the living embodiment of Ra. As pharaoh, Ramses II saw himself as the spiritual protector of Egypt, a leader imbued with divine strength and the will of the gods. His Horus name reflected his military might and the protection of Egypt from external threats, which was central to his identity as a ruler. Akhenaten, originally known as Amenhotep IV, is infamous for his religious reforms and his devotion to the sun god Aten. The name Akhenaten means effective for Aten, or spirit of Aten. This name marked a radical shift in Egyptian religion, as Akhenaten moved away from the traditional worship of multiple gods to focus solely on the worship of the Aten, the sun disk. Akhenaten's name thus symbolized his personal connection to Aten, whom he believed was the sole deity worthy of worship. This radical change was reflected in his rule, where he reformed Egypt's religious and artistic traditions, although his reforms were largely abandoned after his death. His Horus name aligned with this divine transition, showing his connection to the god Aten and asserting his role as the sole representative of this god on earth. Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, is one of the most well-known pharaohs, particularly due to her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Her name, Cleopatra, comes from the Greek kleos, meaning glory, and patros, meaning father, so it translates to glory of her father. While the Ptolemaic dynasty was Greek in origin, Cleopatra's name reflected a strong connection to her royal lineage and her father, Ptolemy XII. Her reign was marked by political alliances and her assertive role in Egypt's political survival. Despite her Greek heritage, Cleopatra adopted many of the traditions of the pharaohs before her and presented herself as the embodiment of Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood, reinforcing her connection to Egypt's spiritual and divine heritage. The name Tutankhamun means living image of Amen, derived from the god Amun, one of Egypt's chief deities. His birth name, Tutankhamun, meaning living image of Aten, was changed after the death of his father, Akhenaten, and the restoration of the traditional gods of Egypt. His new name, Tutankhamun, signified a return to the worship of Amun and the traditional religious practices that had been abandoned by his father. Tutankhamun's name reflects his role as the divine ruler of Egypt, guided by the will of Amun, and it also symbolized his place within the sacred cycle of Egyptian kingship, where the pharaoh was seen as a direct representative of the gods on earth. The names of the pharaohs were not just labels. They were an embodiment of their rule, their divine right to govern, and their connection to the gods. Each pharaoh's regnal name was carefully chosen to reflect their divine authority and the spiritual significance of their reign. These names, often surrounded by the sacred cartouche, were more than words. They were a powerful statement of divine protection, a declaration that the pharaoh was not just a mortal man, but a living god, chosen to rule and protect Egypt for eternity. With each name etched into monuments, temples, and tombs, the pharaoh's power was immortalized, and their divine legacy was sealed for generations to come. The belief in the pharaoh as a living god didn't just appear out of nowhere. It evolved from centuries of mythology, cultural practices, and the relationship between Egypt's kings and their gods. From the very beginning of Egypt's history, the role of the king was seen as something sacred, rooted deeply in religion and spiritual beliefs. And as Egypt's civilization grew, so too did the connection between the king and the divine. In Egypt's earliest times, before the great dynasties, kings were already seen as more than just rulers. They were mediators between the gods and the people, and they were entrusted with maintaining order and balance in the land. This was called Ma'at, a concept that represented truth, justice, and cosmic order. The king's primary responsibility was to uphold this balance and ensure that Egypt remained prosperous and protected. The king was tasked with keeping Egypt in harmony with the gods and the natural world, ensuring the floods of the Nile came, the crops grew, and the land remained safe from invaders. The idea of the king as the protector of this order was deeply rooted in Egyptian culture and religion, but the concept of kingship gradually transformed as Egyptian civilization grew more complex. As Egypt's religious beliefs evolved, so did the idea of kingship. It was believed that the gods themselves had a hand in the establishment of the first kingdoms. The god Horus, one of Egypt's most important deities, was considered the protector of Egypt, a god of kingship and the embodiment of royal power. Horus was associated with the sky and the sun, often depicted as a falcon or with the head of a falcon, representing strength, vision, and divine protection. In the eyes of the Egyptians, the pharaoh was not simply a ruler. They were Horus incarnate on earth, chosen by the gods to carry out their will and to rule with divine authority. But the connection to the divine didn't stop with Horus. Pharaohs were also believed to be descended from Ra, the sun god, who was considered the creator of all life. Ra's journey through the sky each day symbolized the pharaoh's journey through life and death. As both Ra and the pharaoh maintained cosmic order, Ra was thought to sail across the sky during the day and travel through the underworld, bringing life and light to the world, only to return again each morning. Just as Ra brought life and prosperity to Egypt, the pharaoh was seen as the god on earth who provided that same life and prosperity to his people. The belief in pharaohs as living gods was intertwined with Egypt's understanding of the afterlife. In ancient Egyptian belief, life did not end with death. The pharaoh was believed to continue ruling in the afterlife, maintaining the balance and order of Egypt from the world of the dead. Death, for the pharaoh, was seen not as an end, but as a transition to a higher existence, where they would join the gods and continue their divine duties. This is why monumental tombs, pyramids, and elaborate burial practices were so essential for the pharaohs. They were not just preparing for death, but for eternal life as a god. In the early dynastic period, pharaohs began to solidify their divine status. They were seen as gods walking on earth, not merely kings of mortal flesh. Pharaohs would perform rituals, make offerings to the gods, and oversee monumental construction projects to honor the divine. As the pharaoh was believed to be the earthly embodiment of Horus, their power wasn't just political, it was divine. They were seen as the only one capable of ensuring Egypt's protection, prosperity, and stability, because only a god could maintain Mayat in a world full of chaos and uncertainty. This belief in divine kingship was not just political. It permeated all aspects of Egyptian life. It was a deeply spiritual relationship between the pharaoh, the gods, and the people. The pharaoh was the living conduit for divine power, ensuring the will of the gods was carried out, from military campaigns to agricultural practices to the intricate rituals of religion. When the pharaoh made decisions, it was believed they were guided by the gods themselves. If they were victorious in battle, it was seen as a sign of divine favor. If they led Egypt through times of prosperity, it was seen as the gods' blessing upon their reign. And if Egypt faced hard times, it was often interpreted as the pharaoh's failure to properly serve the gods. Over time, this belief in the pharaoh as a living god became deeply entrenched in Egyptian culture. The pharaoh's connection to Horus and Ra, along with their role in maintaining cosmic order, became central to Egypt's sense of identity. The people of Egypt looked to the pharaoh not just for governance, but for spiritual guidance. The pharaoh's names, their titles, and their monuments were all meant to reinforce their divine status. The cartouche, a royal emblem surrounding the pharaoh's name, symbolized their protection by the gods and the unbreakable bond between the pharaoh and the divine realm. Every act, from the smallest ritual to the grandest construction project, carried the weight of the god's will, ensuring that the pharaoh remained the highest authority, not only in the land of the living, but in the afterlife as well. So, the pharaoh's divinity wasn't just a title. It was the foundation of their reign. It shaped their identity, their actions, and their legacy. To the people of Egypt, the pharaoh was not just their king. They were a living god, a divine ruler who bridged the gap between the mortal and the immortal, ensuring Egypt's prosperity both in this life and the next. The ancient Egyptians had a deeply spiritual and complex belief system surrounding the afterlife, one that permeated all aspects of their culture. Death was not seen as an end, but as a transition from one realm to another, and how well a person, especially a pharaoh, was prepared for the afterlife determined their future in the next world. For the pharaohs, the journey into the afterlife was even more sacred, as they believed they would continue to rule, not just over Egypt, but over the entire world of the gods. In ancient Egyptian belief, life was a continuous cycle, and death was just the beginning of the next phase. The soul, or Ka, was considered the essence of a person, what made them who they were. And it was believed that this soul continued to live after the body died. However, for the soul to continue its journey, it needed to be preserved. And for the pharaohs, the stakes were high. They were not merely kings of the living. They were seen as gods on earth, and their place in the afterlife had to be secured for the good of Egypt and the kingdom's prosperity. The afterlife was a complex and mysterious realm, known as the Duat, a mystical underworld that the dead had to navigate before they could join the gods. In this afterlife, pharaohs were believed to continue their role as divine rulers, ensuring Egypt's protection and prosperity. The ultimate goal was to reach Aru, the field of reeds, a paradise where the pharaoh would live forever, continuing to rule alongside the gods. But the journey wasn't simple. Pharaohs had to pass through a series of trials, dangers, and challenges, where they were judged by the gods. What happened when a pharaoh died? When a pharaoh died, their journey into the afterlife began with the elaborate process of mummification, an ancient practice intended to preserve the pharaoh's body for eternity. This was believed to be essential for the survival of the soul. The Egyptians believed that if the body decayed, the soul could become lost, trapped in the afterlife, unable to find peace or rest. Preserving the body was not only about maintaining its physical form, but about safeguarding the pharaoh's identity, ensuring their continued presence in the afterlife. The mummification process began immediately after death. The first step was to remove the internal organs, which were considered the source of decay. The heart was left in place, as it was believed to be the seat of the soul, but other organs, the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines, were carefully removed, embalmed, and stored in canopic jars, each one dedicated to a specific deity that would protect the organs. The body was then dried out using natron salts, which absorbed the moisture and prevented decay. This was a delicate and lengthy process that took up to 70 days to complete, but it was essential for the pharaoh's soul to travel to the afterlife undisturbed. Once the body was dried and preserved, it was wrapped in layers of linen, with amulets and charms placed between the layers to protect the pharaoh during their journey. The mummified body was then placed in a sarcophagus, a stone coffin adorned with hieroglyphs and protective spells that ensured the pharaoh's safe passage to the afterlife. The sarcophagus was often inscribed with the pharaoh's name, titles, and a list of their divine responsibilities, ensuring that the gods recognized and honored their continued reign. The pharaoh's journey didn't end with mummification. After death, their soul would embark on a perilous journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. This journey was fraught with dangers, challenges, and trials that would test the pharaoh's worthiness. The most critical part of this journey was the weighing of the heart, where the pharaoh's heart was weighed against the feather of Mayat, a symbol of truth, justice, and cosmic order. The pharaoh's heart had to be light, free from sin, to pass the judgment and enter the afterlife. If the heart was heavier than the feather, it would be devoured by the Ammit, the demoness of judgment, and the pharaoh's soul would be lost, condemned to an eternity of torment. If the pharaoh's heart was found worthy, their soul would continue its journey and be welcomed into the realm of the gods. It was at this point that the pharaoh would become one with Ra, the sun god, rising every day to govern the land and protect Egypt from harm. The pharaoh would then join the gods in Aru, the paradise of the afterlife, where they would continue to rule with divine authority for eternity. The pharaoh's tomb was not just a place for their earthly remains. It was their gateway to the afterlife. Tombs were monumental structures, designed not only to house the body, but to ensure the pharaoh's continued power after death. The tomb's walls were adorned with scenes from the pharaoh's life and their journey to the afterlife, including depictions of rituals, offerings, and the pharaoh's interactions with the gods. These images were not just for the living. They were intended to guide the pharaoh's soul, ensuring their divine protection in the afterlife. The construction of the pyramids, the greatest of which was built for Khufu at Giza, was part of this eternal preparation. These massive stone structures were designed to protect the pharaoh's body and spirit, keeping them safe from tomb robbers, time, and the forces of chaos that threatened to disrupt the pharaoh's journey. The pyramids were aligned with the stars, specifically the constellation of Orion, which was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This alignment was not just a matter of architecture. It was a reflection of the pharaoh's divine connection to the heavens, ensuring that their soul could ascend to the gods. In the tombs, the pharaoh was also buried with the treasures they would need in the afterlife, including food, clothing, jewelry, and statues of servants to accompany them on their journey. These were not just material possessions. They were tools that allowed the pharaoh to continue their divine duties and maintain their authority in the afterlife. The pharaoh would be provided with everything they might need, ensuring that their reign continued long after death. For the pharaohs, the afterlife was not a distant, abstract concept. It was a continuation of their divine rule. Their power did not cease with death. It was transformed into something eternal. They were not just kings of Egypt. They were gods who ruled both the living and the dead. By preparing so thoroughly for the afterlife, the Pharaohs ensured that their divine authority was never in question, that their legacy would continue for eternity. The belief in the afterlife was the foundation of Egypt's culture, and the Pharaohs were the eternal stewards of this divine order, guiding Egypt not only through life, but into the afterlife as well. Imagine a time long before the Great Pyramids rose from the desert sands. Before the massive structures that would later define Egypt's legacy, the pharaohs of Egypt were buried in simple, rectangular tombs known as mastabas, low, flat-roofed structures made of mud brick or stone. These tombs served as burial sites for the pharaohs, a place to house their body for eternity, but they were far from the grand architectural wonders we associate with ancient Egypt today. It was a humble beginning, but like all great empires, Egypt was destined for something more monumental, something that would define the very soul of its civilization. Enter King Djoser, the ruler of Egypt during the Third Dynasty, who became the first pharaoh to envision something greater, something that would change the future of Egypt's tombs forever. Djoser did not settle for the typical mastaba tomb used by his predecessors. He dreamt of a tomb that would not only serve as a place of rest, but as a grand statement of his divine rule and Egypt's eternal glory. This dream would become a reality when Djoser commissioned the construction of the first step pyramid at Saqqara, a monumental achievement that would mark a radical departure from the traditions of the past. But this wasn't just any tomb. The step pyramid of Djoser was a groundbreaking architectural marvel, a structure that would forever change the course of Egypt's monumental architecture. The pyramid, designed by the brilliant architect Imhotep, was a towering structure of stone with a series of 6 steps leading up to a square platform at the top. The sheer size and complexity of the step pyramid were nothing short of revolutionary. For the first time in Egyptian history, stone was used to build a royal tomb, signaling the pharaoh's desire for a structure that would last for eternity, a symbol of his divine power and eternal reign. Before Djoser's step pyramid, the pharaohs were buried in simple mastabas, which, while impressive, could not stand the test of time. But Djoser wanted something more. He wanted a tomb that would not only honor his legacy, but also secure his divine rule for the afterlife. By using stone, a more permanent and durable material, Djoser ensured that his tomb would withstand the ravages of time, while also reflecting the growing belief in the pharaoh's divine nature. The step pyramid was not just a tomb. It was a statement. It was a symbol of Djoser's divine kingship, a testament to the pharaoh's ability to command both the earthly and the spiritual realms. The step pyramid was also revolutionary in its design. Its 6-stepped layers were not only a remarkable feat of engineering, but also represented the pharaoh's ascent to the divine. The pyramid's shape itself was symbolic. Its layers represented the pharaoh's journey to the heavens, where he would join the gods in eternal rule. The pyramid became a celestial symbol, an architectural embodiment of the pharaoh's divine nature, and the growing importance of the afterlife in Egyptian culture. What is truly remarkable about the step pyramid is that it marked the birth of pyramid construction in Egypt. Djoser's tomb would lay the groundwork for the even greater pyramids that followed, such as the iconic Great Pyramid of Giza. But it all began with Djoser and Imhotep, who took the bold step of using stone to create a grand structure, one that would not only house the pharaoh's body, but also serve as a spiritual gateway to the afterlife. It was the beginning of an architectural revolution, a journey that would culminate in the construction of the grandest monuments ever built by humankind. The step pyramid of Djoser was the spark that ignited a new era in Egyptian architecture. It was the moment when the pharaohs began to see their tombs not just as final resting places, but as lasting symbols of their divine rule, their connection to the gods, and their eternal legacy. What began as a single pyramid would grow into an empire of stone, with each new pharaoh striving to outdo their predecessor and build ever more grandiose tombs. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built by Khufu some 100 years later, would become the pinnacle of this architectural journey, standing as the largest and most magnificent pyramid in Egypt. But it was Djoser who made it all possible. Without his vision, without his boldness in choosing stone over mud brick, the pyramids as we know them might never have existed. Djoser and Imhotep set the stage for an architectural tradition that would carry through centuries, forever defining Egypt's ancient civilization and leaving a legacy that continues to captivate the world today. In the end, the Step Pyramid was more than just a tomb. It was a symbol of Egypt's greatness, a physical manifestation of the pharaoh's divine authority, and the beginning of one of the most awe-inspiring architectural traditions in history. Every pyramid that followed was a testament to the pharaoh's belief in the afterlife, the divine rule of the kings, and the desire to be remembered for eternity. It all started with Djoser, the pharaoh, who dared to dream of a tomb that would outlast time itself, a tomb that would echo through the ages, reminding the world of Egypt's enduring power and glory. After the groundbreaking achievement of Djoser's Step Pyramid, Egypt's ambition for grander structures began to take shape. The Step Pyramid was a monumental start, but the pharaohs of the Fourth Dynasty were determined to take pyramid construction even further. Enter Sneferu, a pharaoh whose reign would be defined by his determination to create the perfect pyramid, a feat that would go down in history as both a triumph and a lesson in architectural innovation. Sneferu didn't just want a pyramid. He wanted a pyramid that would stand the test of time, a structure that would outshine all those before it. His vision was nothing less than perfect geometry, smooth surfaces, and a design that would define the very essence of Egyptian monumental architecture. He began his pyramid-building journey with an ambition to build the first true smooth-sided pyramid, which would become the iconic form we associate with the Great Pyramids of Giza. However, as any great innovator knows, the path to perfection is rarely a straight line. Sneferu's first attempt was the bent pyramid, and it wasn't quite what he had in mind. The bent pyramid, located at Dashur, became a fascinating example of trial and error. The construction began with the intention of creating a perfect, smooth-sided pyramid, but something went wrong during the building process. The angle of the sides was too steep for the structure to safely support its massive weight, so the builders adjusted the angle halfway through. This led to the distinctive bent shape, with the lower portion of the pyramid having a steeper angle and the upper portion a much gentler slope. While it may not have been the flawless pyramid Sneferu had envisioned, the bent pyramid was still an impressive feat, showing just how far Egypt had come in its pyramid-building ambitions. Despite the initial setback with the bent pyramid, Sneferu's determination never wavered. He believed that a perfect pyramid was within reach, and so he set his sights on another project, the Red Pyramid, which would go on to be his crowning achievement. Located just a short distance from the bent pyramid, the Red Pyramid would be the first successful smooth-sided pyramid in Egypt's history. After the lessons learned from the bent pyramid, Sneferu and his engineers altered their approach, ensuring that the angles were just right, that the stone blocks were carefully placed, and that the structure was sound from the base to the top. The Red Pyramid stood as a symbol of Egypt's architectural prowess, a triumph over the challenges faced during the construction of the bent pyramid. It was a true smooth-sided pyramid, with the sides sloping gently to a point at the top, marking the transition from the earlier, more crude structures to the refined, monumental pyramids that would follow. The Red Pyramid wasn't just a successful pyramid. It was a statement, an example of what could be achieved when vision, ambition, and innovation came together. Sneferu's success with the Red Pyramid paved the way for his successors, including his son Khufu, who would go on to build the Great Pyramid of Giza, the largest and most iconic pyramid of them all. But Sneferu's contributions were more than just architectural. His legacy was rooted in his determination to push boundaries and his willingness to learn from failure. While the bent pyramid might have been seen as a mistake by some, it was a crucial step in the evolution of pyramid construction. It was proof that the pharaohs of Egypt were not content to rest on their laurels. They were constantly striving for greater heights, literally and figuratively. Every misstep, every recalibration, was part of a grander vision, one that would leave an indelible mark on history. Through Snefru's boldness and his relentless pursuit of architectural perfection, Egypt's pyramid-building tradition reached new heights. His work set the stage for future pharaohs, and his innovations in pyramid design would influence generations of architects and builders. Snefru's role in the evolution of the pyramid was about more than just stones and mortar. It was about vision, determination, and the belief that through trial and error, Egypt could achieve greatness. The Red Pyramid stands today as a testament to that vision, a monument not only to a pharaoh, but to the enduring spirit of innovation and progress that defined ancient Egypt. When we think of the wonders of the ancient world, there is one structure that stands out above all others: the Great Pyramid of Giza, a true marvel of engineering and human ingenuity. Built by Pharaoh Khufu, also known as Cheops, this pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a monumental statement of Egypt's power, precision, and divine authority. Towering at a height of 481 feet when it was completed, the Great Pyramid was the tallest man-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. Even today, despite its slight loss in height due to the removal of the outer casing, it still looms over the Giza Plateau as one of the most impressive structures ever built. Imagine standing at the base of the Great Pyramid, looking up at the massive blocks of stone, each one weighing several tons, stacked perfectly to form this giant structure. It wasn't just the scale of the pyramid that left people in awe. It was the precision with which it was constructed. The angles are almost perfect. The stones are cut with such accuracy that modern engineering tools would struggle to achieve the same results. The pyramid's alignment with the cardinal points of the compass is so precise that it still astounds engineers and archaeologists today. The sheer scale, the precision, and the attention to detail make the Great Pyramid not just an architectural wonder, but a testament to the skill and vision of the ancient Egyptians. The construction of such a massive structure, however, raises a lot of questions. How did they do it? How did they manage to move such enormous stones, some weighing as much as 80 tons, and lift them to heights unimaginable for their time? There have been countless theories, some more plausible than others. But one thing is clear: the construction of the Great Pyramid was an incredible feat that required ingenuity, innovation, and a massive workforce. One popular theory, often depicted in movies, suggests that slaves were forced to build the pyramid under the whip of the pharaoh. While this makes for dramatic storytelling, modern evidence tells a different story. Archaeologists have discovered that the workers who built the Great Pyramid were likely skilled laborers, many of them permanent workers who lived near the pyramid site. These workers were not slaves. They were highly trained and well-compensated craftsmen, engineers, and laborers who worked in a coordinated effort to achieve the impossible. They were part of a vast, well-organized workforce, and they took pride in their work, knowing they were contributing to one of the most sacred and important projects in Egypt's history. Now, how did they actually move those massive stones? That's where the ingenuity of ancient Egypt comes into play. One of the leading theories is that ramps were used to transport the stones to higher levels as the pyramid grew taller. These ramps were likely built around the pyramid, winding up as the construction progressed, allowing workers to drag the stones up with ropes and wooden sledges. Some theories suggest that a spiral ramp was used, wrapping around the pyramid as it rose, allowing workers to move the stones with ease. Other theories suggest a straight ramp leading up to the pyramid, though no definitive evidence of either type of ramp has been discovered yet. Regardless of the exact method, it's clear that ramps played a crucial role in the construction process. But the ramps were only one part of the story. The precision of the cuts made in the stones, the alignment of the pyramid, and the sheer scale of the project all suggest a level of advanced engineering knowledge that was way ahead of its time. How did they achieve such precision without the modern tools we have today? Some experts believe that the Egyptians used simple tools like copper saws, chisels, and leveling instruments, but they also had a deep understanding of mathematics, geometry, and astronomy. The alignment of the Great Pyramid with the stars, specifically with the constellation of Orion, is a testament to their astronomical knowledge. The Egyptians knew the stars, and the heavens were connected to the gods, and they used their knowledge of the cosmos to build a pyramid that was not only a tomb, but a gateway to the afterlife. The workers, the tools, the methods. They all point to one thing. The Great Pyramid was built through a combination of human genius, religious fervor, and practical ingenuity. It wasn't just a tomb for Khufu. It was a grand symbol of Egypt's eternal power, a divine connection between the pharaoh and the gods. The pyramid was designed to house the pharaoh's soul for eternity, ensuring that his divine rule would continue even after death. It wasn't just an engineering marvel. It was a spiritual monument, a lasting tribute to the pharaoh's godly nature and Egypt's immortal strength. And let's not forget the workers. The Great Pyramid wasn't just a symbol of Khufu's divine authority. It was also a symbol of the collective effort of the Egyptians who built it. The laborers, engineers, and craftsmen who worked on the pyramid weren't just serving a pharaoh. They were serving a larger purpose, creating a monument that would stand the test of time and forever embody Egypt's divine connection to the gods. The pyramid was not only a tomb, but a place of spiritual significance, where the pharaoh's soul could ascend to the heavens and continue their divine reign in the afterlife. The pyramid, in all its grandeur, was more than just a structure of stone. It was a symbol of Egypt's belief in the eternal, a belief that the pharaoh, once dead, would still govern the land as a god. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built by Khufu, remains not just one of the greatest engineering feats in human history, but a lasting testament to the power of Egypt, the vision of its pharaohs, and the ingenuity of its people. Even after thousands of years, it still stands, towering over the Giza Plateau, a symbol of what humanity can achieve when faith, knowledge, and ambition unite to create something truly monumental. The pharaoh's role as the supreme ruler of Egypt was not a static one. Unlike many monarchs in other parts of the world, pharaohs were deeply involved in the daily operations of the state and were actively present in the governance of the land. They weren't simply political figures. They were the very embodiment of Egypt's spiritual and earthly order, and their reign stretched far beyond the luxurious halls of their palaces. The pharaoh did not merely delegate their duties to officials and advisors. They actively took part in the daily life of Egypt. The ruler would often travel across the land to ensure that everything from the fields to the factories to the temples was in proper order. This wasn't just a ceremonial visit. It was a hands-on approach. From inspecting the grain fields to ensuring the Nile floodwaters reached the right places for irrigation, the pharaoh was involved in the most crucial aspects of Egypt's agricultural system. The economy depended entirely on the ability to harness the power of the Nile, and the pharaoh's duty was to oversee this process personally. They were the ultimate judge of the land's prosperity, ensuring that taxes were fair and that local officials were following the laws of Egypt. Pharaohs were also responsible for overseeing the distribution of land, settling disputes, and making sure that the economy was working in the best interest of Egypt and its people. This was a leadership style deeply connected to the land itself, as the pharaohs were seen as gods whose divine mandate ensured the success of the kingdom's agricultural and economic systems. But it wasn't just about inspecting harvests and taxes. Pharaohs also played a significant role in the judicial system. If there was a major dispute or an important case, the pharaoh had the final say. They were the ultimate authority in the kingdom, with power to govern both the material and spiritual aspects of Egyptian life. Their ability to interpret the will of the gods and apply it to the daily lives of their people was a key aspect of their reign. The pharaoh's direct engagement with the local populations helped create a deep sense of loyalty and connection with their subjects. Unlike modern leaders who may rule from a distant capital, pharaohs were intimately involved with the lives of their people. They didn't just rely on others to ensure law and order. They were active in the courts, ensuring that justice was served and that Egypt remained a land of peace and prosperity. Their presence in the communities was not just a political move. It was a demonstration of their divine mandate. The pharaoh was seen as the god-king of Egypt, and through their presence and actions, they reaffirmed this role as the divine protector of the people. In villages, the pharaoh's presence meant that the social welfare of the people was being addressed. They ensured that the basic needs of the people were met, that laws were fair, and that Egypt's stability was maintained. It wasn't just about ruling from a high throne. It was about being a protector of the people, listening to their needs, and ensuring their well-being. This deep connection between the pharaoh and their people made Egypt a unique civilization, where divine authority was inseparable from the ruler's day-to-day actions. The pharaoh was not just the god of the Nile. They were also the military leader who commanded Egypt's armies, securing the kingdom's borders and extending its influence. Egypt's military might was key to the kingdom's prosperity, and the pharaoh had to maintain a strong, disciplined army ready to defend the kingdom and expand its territories. Pharaohs led military campaigns to secure Egypt's borders and defend its interests, but they also sought to expand Egypt's influence into neighboring regions. Whether it was campaigns in Nubia, the Levant, or along the Sinai Peninsula, the pharaoh had to maintain dominance over Egypt's surrounding lands. Military campaigns weren't just about conquest. They were also about securing trade routes, collecting tribute, and ensuring Egypt's wealth and power were protected. The pharaoh was the head of Egypt's war machine, and their military prowess ensured the kingdom remained secure. Whether it was defending Egypt from invasions or establishing diplomatic treaties with neighboring kingdoms, the pharaoh's role as a military commander was essential in maintaining Egypt's greatness. The Battle of Kadesh is one of the most famous and significant military encounters in ancient Egyptian history, and it showcases the complexity of Pharaoh's military leadership. The battle took place around 1274 BCE during the reign of Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great, one of Egypt's most celebrated pharaohs. The battle was fought between the Egyptian forces, led by Ramses II, and the Hittite Empire, which was a powerful force in the ancient Near East, led by King Muwatalli II. The Battle of Kadesh holds historical significance not only because of the military tactics used and the large forces involved, but also because it was one of the earliest battles in history to be documented in detail. Ramses II himself left multiple records of the battle, giving us a first-hand account of the events. These records, found on the walls of temples like those in Abu Simbel and the Temple of Karnak, highlight the pharaoh's perspective, emphasizing his bravery and tactical genius while adding layers of drama to the story. The background to the Battle of Kadesh lies in the long-standing tensions between Egypt and the Hittite Empire. The Hittites, based in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, had risen to power and were expanding their territory into the regions near Egypt's borders. The Egyptian pharaohs, seeking to protect Egypt's interests and secure control over key trade routes and regions, saw the Hittites as a significant threat. Ramses II, who ascended to the throne in 1279 BCE, inherited these tensions and decided to act decisively. His goal was to weaken the Hittites and secure Egypt's borders, particularly in the region of Canaan and Syria, which were strategically important for Egypt's trade and military control. The city of Kadesh, located on the Orontes River in modern-day Syria, stood as a crucial fortress and a key Hittite stronghold. In 1274 BCE, Ramses II launched a military campaign to conquer Kadesh and solidify Egypt's dominance in the region. He led an army of around 20,000 men, including infantry, charioteers, and archers, and set out to confront the Hittite forces, which were similarly powerful and well-equipped. numbering around 30,000 to 40,000 troops. What makes the Battle of Kadesh particularly fascinating is the dramatic turn of events that occurred during the engagement. Initially, Ramses II was confident in his forces, and his strategy was to split his army into 4 divisions, each led by one of his generals. Ramses himself commanded the Amman division, which was considered the elite force of the Egyptian army. However, the Hittite forces had anticipated Ramses' strategy, and the Hittite king, Muwatalli II, set a brilliant trap. The Hittites, using their superior intelligence networks and spies, knew the Egyptian movements and had positioned their forces strategically. They hid their chariot divisions behind a mountain, waiting to ambush the Egyptians when they came close enough to the city of Kadesh. Ramses II, at first, underestimated the Hittite strength. He thought the city was poorly defended and that his forces could overrun it easily. But just as he approached, the Hittites launched a devastating surprise attack, hitting the Egyptian divisions hard from the rear and side. The Egyptian soldiers were caught off guard and surrounded by a larger and better positioned enemy force. In the midst of this chaos, Ramses II demonstrated the courage and leadership that would become legendary. According to Egyptian accounts, Ramses was separated from the bulk of his forces, with only a handful of soldiers left to defend him. He found himself surrounded by the Hittites and was nearly captured. But as the Pharaoh's own records tell it, he fought valiantly, managing to rally his troops and push back the Hittite forces. One of the most dramatic moments of the battle was Ramses' ability to hold his ground and inspire his men to counterattack. As the Pharaoh saw his forces falter, he refused to retreat. Instead, he personally led a charge against the Hittite chariots, and with his strategic thinking, he managed to break through the enemy's lines. At this critical juncture, Ramses' army was reinvigorated by his leadership, and the Egyptians pushed the Hittites back, eventually securing a stalemate. Though the battle was inconclusive in terms of military victory, Ramses II made sure that it would be seen as a moral victory. He painted himself as a hero who single-handedly turned the tide of battle, though the reality was that both sides suffered heavy casualties. While the battle itself ended in a stalemate, it had far-reaching consequences for Egypt and the Hittites. The fighting caused extensive destruction, but neither side could claim a clear victory. However, the Egyptian records, especially the inscriptions at Karnak and Abu Simbel, portray Ramses II as the ultimate victor, claiming that he decisively defeated the Hittites and expanded Egypt's influence. In reality, the battle set the stage for diplomatic negotiations. Ramses, recognizing that Egypt could not afford prolonged conflict with the Hittites, reached out for peace. In 1259 BCE, the Egyptians and Hittites signed one of the first known peace treaties in history. This treaty was remarkable for its terms, which established peaceful relations between the two powers and regulated issues like trade, borders, and mutual defense. It was not only a political victory, but a diplomatic triumph, showcasing Ramses' ability to balance military might with strategic diplomacy. This peace treaty is considered a milestone in the history of diplomacy, setting the precedent for future international agreements. It was a testament to Ramses II's ability to blend military and diplomatic efforts to secure Egypt's dominance, both in the battlefield and at the negotiation table. The Battle of Kadesh left an indelible mark on Egypt's history. While it was not a decisive victory in the traditional sense, it cemented Ramses II's legacy as one of Egypt's greatest military leaders. He was celebrated not just for his battlefield heroism, but also for his ability to adapt and turn a seemingly dire situation into an opportunity for diplomacy. The peace treaty that followed the battle also ensured Egypt's stability in the region for years to come. It allowed Ramses II to focus on other monumental achievements, such as expanding Egypt's trade routes, building grand monuments, and promoting Egyptian culture and influence across the ancient world. In the Egyptian psyche, the battle became a symbol of Ramses II's strength, his divine favor, and his ability to turn the tide of history in his favor. The Pharaoh was immortalized as a hero, one who faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious, even if the battle itself was a drawn conflict. His name would go down in history as one of the great pharaohs, not only because of his military conquests, but also because of his ability to bring Egypt into an era of peace and prosperity, one that would continue long after the Battle of Kadesh. This legacy of strength, resilience, and diplomacy made Ramses II's reign one of the longest and most prosperous in Egyptian history, securing his place as one of Egypt's greatest rulers. The pharaoh's life wasn't just about governing Egypt. It was also about maintaining a sacred connection between the people and the gods. Their daily routines were deeply intertwined with religious observance, as they were not only kings, but also spiritual leaders, ensuring that Egypt's relationship with the divine was strong and unbroken. Every action, every ceremony, every ritual they performed had profound significance, not just for their own rule, but for the entire kingdom. The pharaoh was seen as the mediator between the mortal world and the divine, standing at the intersection of human life and the will of the gods, ensuring that divine favor flowed in Egypt's direction. At the heart of the pharaoh's responsibilities were the religious ceremonies that marked every day of their reign. These rituals were not just symbolic. They were essential to Egypt's survival and prosperity. Every day, the pharaoh would offer prayers, light incense, and present sacrifices at the temples of Egypt's most powerful gods, from Ra, the sun god, to Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, and Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Each offering was carefully crafted, ensuring that the gods were honored and pleased with the pharaoh's devotion. These ceremonies were not simply acts of faith. They were acts of power, ensuring that Egypt's divine rulers maintained their favor, which in turn ensured Egypt's prosperity. The temples themselves were sacred spaces, and the pharaoh was the chief priest, performing rituals in these monumental buildings to keep the gods close to Egypt. These rituals were elaborate affairs, often involving priests, musicians, dancers, and even sacrifices, all meant to ensure that Egypt remained in the good graces of the gods. The pharaoh would lead these ceremonies, reinforcing their status as not just the king of Egypt, but the spiritual leader, the high priest, who spoke directly to the gods on behalf of the people. Among the most important of these ceremonies was the Opet festival, a grand religious celebration that reinforced the pharaoh's divine connection. This festival, held annually in the great city of Thebes, celebrated the power of the gods and the pharaoh's role as the link between the divine and mortal realms. The festival involved a procession in which the statue of Amun-Ra was carried from the Karnak temple to the Luxor temple, symbolizing the unity between the pharaoh, the gods, and Egypt itself. The pharaoh played a central role in this ritual, leading the procession and offering prayers and gifts to Amun-Ra to ensure that Egypt's power would remain undiminished and its lands fertile. The Opet festival was a celebration of the pharaoh's divine status, an annual reminder of the kingdom's connection to the gods. In addition to their role as high priest, the pharaoh was also responsible for upholding Ma'at, the divine order that governed not only Egypt, but the entire universe. Ma'at was the very essence of cosmic balance, justice, and truth, ensuring that the forces of chaos never overcame the forces of order. For Egypt, maintaining Ma'at was not just a religious duty. It was a matter of life and death. If the pharaoh failed to keep Ma'at in place, chaos would descend on the kingdom. Rivers would stop flowing, crops would fail, and the land would be ravaged by disease and famine. The pharaoh's actions were directly tied to the stability of the universe itself. The pharaoh was the living embodiment of Ma'at, and their daily actions were seen as a reflection of divine order. To act justly, to make wise decisions, to ensure the prosperity of Egypt. These were the pharaoh's divine duties, ensuring that Ma'at was upheld across the land. In a sense, every aspect of the pharaoh's rule was an act of maintaining balance and order. Their leadership was divine in nature, governing not just over the land of Egypt, but over the heavens, ensuring that the stars stayed in their courses, that the seasons remained predictable, and that the forces of chaos were kept at bay. The Pharaoh's presence in daily life was not just as a ruler, but as a protector of the cosmic order. Even the Pharaoh's military campaigns, their agricultural policies, and their family decisions were all seen as maintaining or disrupting this divine order. Their every decision affected not just the land of Egypt, but the very structure of the cosmos. If the Pharaoh was successful in maintaining Ma'at, the people believed that Egypt would flourish. A Nile would flood at the right time, crops would be abundant, and peace would reign across the kingdom. But if the Pharaoh failed in their divine duty, the consequences were dire. Plagues, famines, and invasions were seen as signs that Ma'at had been disturbed, and the Pharaoh had failed to keep the divine order in place. The Pharaoh's role as a spiritual leader was therefore not just ceremonial. It was central to Egypt's very survival. And the Pharaoh understood this weight. Every time they performed a ritual or made a public decision, they knew they were holding the entire kingdom's fate in their hands. Their relationship with the gods was not a matter of personal belief. It was a practical necessity for Egypt's existence. The Pharaoh, as the living god on earth, was responsible for maintaining that connection between the divine and the mortal realms, ensuring that Egypt continued to thrive in the world of the living and in the afterlife. The Pharaoh's duties were not just those of a ruler. They were those of a divine servant, one whose actions governed not just the land, but the very universe. The Pharaohs of Egypt lived with the constant understanding that their power was not just political. It was spiritual, and that their ability to govern and maintain order had profound implications for Egypt and the entire cosmos. The divine responsibility of upholding Ma'at and connecting the people with the gods was not just a title. It was the essence of the Pharaoh's existence, shaping everything they did, from military campaigns to family decisions, from ritual prayers to the construction of monumental pyramids. The Pharaoh was not just a king. They were the heartbeat of Egypt's divine order, ensuring that both the land and the heavens remained in perfect balance. The family life of a pharaoh was a complex tapestry of power, duty, and divine obligation. While the pharaohs were seen as gods on earth, their personal lives were far from simple, filled with political maneuvering, alliances, and the weight of ensuring Egypt's future. Pharaohs often had numerous wives and concubines, and these marriages were not about love in the traditional sense. They were strategic alliances, carefully arranged to maintain the royal bloodline and strengthen Egypt's grip on power. Marriages were not just about union. They were about ensuring political stability and securing Egypt's position in the world. Marriages for the pharaohs were pivotal for consolidating dynastic power. The pharaoh needed to ensure that Egypt's ruling family remained powerful, not just for the present, but for generations to come. Royal marriages were arranged with the precision of a chess game, each one strengthening alliances with other influential families and foreign kingdoms. Marrying daughters of powerful foreign rulers was a common way to secure alliances with neighboring lands and keep peace with rival nations. These marriages ensured that Egypt's royal family remained interconnected with other powerful empires, both politically and militarily, solidifying Egypt's status on the world stage. By marrying multiple wives and concubines, the pharaoh not only expanded their own family, but ensured the continuation of their dynasty, with the hope that each marriage would produce heirs strong enough to carry Egypt's legacy into the future. Among the many wives, however, there were always a few queens who stood out and played significant roles in the political and spiritual life of Egypt. These queens were not mere consorts. They were leaders, advisors, and sometimes even rulers in their own right. One of the most famous queens was Nefertiti, the wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Nefertiti was not just a beauty admired for her stunning bust. She was a powerful political figure in Egypt. During Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti played an active role in the religious reforms, helping her husband in the worship of the sun god Aten. Together, they ushered in one of the most radical religious shifts in Egypt's history, even attempting to shift Egypt's polytheistic beliefs toward monotheism. Nefertiti's influence was so great that after Akhenaten's death, there are suggestions she may have briefly ruled Egypt herself, either as a co-regent or as pharaoh in her own right. She stands as one of the most powerful women in ancient Egyptian history. Another iconic queen was Cleopatra, who has remained one of history's most famous figures. While many people remember her for her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, Cleopatra was far more than just a lover. She was an astute political leader, a strategist, and a master diplomat. Cleopatra ruled Egypt in a time when the kingdom was in decline, and through her relationships with powerful Roman leaders, she helped secure Egypt's position in the ever-changing Mediterranean world. She was known for her intelligence, her fluency in several languages, and her ability to charm and manipulate the most powerful men in Rome to Egypt's advantage. Cleopatra's reign marked a turning point in Egypt's history, as she navigated the complex waters of Roman politics, attempting to preserve Egypt's independence in a world that was increasingly dominated by Rome. Then there was Hatshepsut, one of the most unique and remarkable figures in Egyptian history. Hatshepsut rose to power in a male-dominated world and ruled as pharaoh for over 20 years, becoming one of the most successful rulers of Egypt. After the death of her husband, Thutmose II, she took on the role of regent for her young stepson, Thutmose III. However, rather than simply acting as a caretaker, Hatshepsut assumed the title of pharaoh herself, wearing the traditional male regalia and ruling with an iron fist. Her reign was marked by peace, prosperity, and monumental building projects, including the construction of her magnificent temple at Deir el-Bahari. Hatshepsut is often remembered for her strength, her political cunning, and her ability to break with tradition to become one of Egypt's most successful rulers, despite the societal norms of the time. While these queens were undoubtedly powerful, the parenting and succession of Egypt's future pharaohs were at the heart of the royal family's strategy. The pharaoh was not only the ruler of Egypt in life, but also the father of Egypt's future. Ensuring the succession of the throne was one of the pharaoh's most critical responsibilities. The pharaoh's eldest son, often from a principal wife, would typically be groomed to take over the throne upon the death of the pharaoh. This training was extensive, involving military campaigns, administrative duties, and education in the religious practices that would make him the next divine ruler of Egypt. The pharaoh was seen as the father of all Egypt, and his primary responsibility was to ensure that his son, and by extension, the kingdom, was ready to continue Egypt's great legacy. However, succession was not always as straightforward as it seemed. While the eldest son was often the chosen heir, this did not always guarantee a smooth transition. Pharaohs could have numerous children, many of whom had to be educated in the ways of rulership, with some vying for the throne. Rivalry for the throne could lead to conflict and even assassination, as power struggles within the royal family were not uncommon. This made the pharaoh's family life even more complex, as the pharaoh had to navigate these tensions while ensuring Egypt's future remained secure. The royal family was the foundation of Egypt's legacy, and the pharaoh's role as both a father and leader was deeply intertwined. Their marriages, children, and family dynamics played a central role in Egypt's governance, as maintaining a stable family line was essential to the continuity of the throne. The pharaoh's children were not just heirs to the throne. They were the future of Egypt itself, and the pharaoh's legacy was built on their ability to lead, protect, and continue the divine line that started with the gods themselves. So, while the pharaoh's public life was often steeped in grandeur, divine duty, and political affairs, their family life was a complex and vital part of their reign. Each marriage, each child, each decision regarding the royal bloodline had long-lasting consequences for Egypt's future. The Pharaoh's family was not just a personal matter. It was a political, social, and spiritual cornerstone of Egypt's legacy. The pharaoh, as both a king and a family leader, had to balance the demands of governance, religion, and succession, all while ensuring that their divine reign would continue for generations. The pharaoh's family life was more than just royal. It was the very heartbeat of Egypt's eternal glory. Pharaohs were not only the supreme rulers of Egypt, but also its greatest architects, creating monuments that have stood the test of time and continue to inspire awe across the world. Their reigns were not just about governing the land and people, but about leaving behind a legacy in stone, a monumental expression of their power, their connection to the gods, and their eternal place in Egypt's history. The pharaoh was not just a king. They were a builder of civilizations, shaping the very landscape of Egypt with their grand construction projects, temples, and statues that would survive long after their death. The construction of temples was a central part of the pharaoh's role. These magnificent structures were not simply places of worship. They were symbolic of the pharaoh's divine power. Temples like the vast temple of Karnak were not just designed to honor the gods, but to honor the pharaoh's own legacy. The pharaoh was the living god on earth, and the temples they built were a reflection of this divine status. These temples were often designed to be sprawling complexes, with courtyards, columns, and sanctuaries dedicated to Egypt's powerful pantheon of gods. But these temples were also symbols of the pharaoh's power, standing as towering reminders of their ability to shape Egypt's destiny. The Temple of Karnak, for example, was expanded over centuries, with each successive pharaoh adding their own mark to the structure, leaving a lasting imprint on the landscape. But it wasn't just temples that the pharaohs constructed. Pyramids, massive statues, and palaces were all part of the pharaoh's architectural vision. The pyramids of Egypt are the most iconic monuments ever built, and they were not just tombs. These grand structures were meant to symbolize the pharaoh's eternal reign, to ensure that their divine rule would continue into the afterlife. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built by Khufu, is a testament to the pharaoh's desire for immortality, a massive structure that continues to tower over the Giza Plateau, a symbol of Egypt's strength and the pharaoh's vision. But the pyramids were just one piece of the puzzle. The pharaohs also commissioned massive statues, like the Colossi of Memnon, which stood as guardians over the tombs, their colossal forms forever watching over the land, reminding everyone who passed by of the pharaoh's divine authority. These monumental constructions served religious purposes, but they also symbolized power. The pharaoh's power was not just rooted in the hearts of their people. It was anchored in the stone and mortar of Egypt's landscape. The buildings they left behind were not only spiritual monuments, but political symbols, signaling to the world the pharaoh's enduring influence, not just in life, but in death. Their constructions told a story that would echo for thousands of years. In addition to building temples and pyramids, pharaohs were also great patrons of the arts. They knew that true power was not just about the physical, the tangible. It was about the cultural, the artistic expression that would define Egypt's legacy for generations to come. During their reigns, the pharaohs commissioned the creation of art, music, and literature, all aimed at glorifying their rule, their connection to the gods, and the military victories they achieved. Art wasn't just decoration. It was propaganda. The pharaohs understood that the images of their rule would outlast them, and so they created elaborate murals, carvings, and sculptures that celebrated their divine right to rule and their connection to the gods. Intricate carvings and murals adorned the walls of temples, palaces, and tombs, depicting the pharaoh in divine poses, offering to the gods, and engaging in ritualistic ceremonies. These works of art were not just decorative. They were symbols of the pharaoh's divine authority, immortalizing their military victories and their spiritual connection to the divine realm. The pharaohs commissioned artworks that would outlast their physical bodies, with each image carefully crafted to ensure their place in Egypt's history and in the eyes of the gods. Papyrus scrolls were written to tell the stories of the pharaohs' victories, to document their divine acts, and to ensure that future generations would remember them as gods. One of the most well-known examples of pharaoh patronage in art is the tomb of Tutankhamun. Inside this remarkable tomb, unearthed by Howard Carter in 1922, lay over 5,000 items, many of them intricately decorated with gold, jewels, and detailed paintings. These treasures weren't just for the pharaoh's enjoyment in the afterlife. They were meant to ensure that he could continue his reign, both spiritually and symbolically. His tomb, covered in stunning murals, tells the story of his life, his reign, and his journey into the afterlife, immortalizing him in a way no ruler before him had been. But the pharaohs weren't just patrons of grand sculptures and murals. They were also patrons of literature. The scribes of Egypt, who were highly respected, worked under the pharaoh's command to write down royal decrees, religious texts, and records of military conquests. The pyramid texts, written in the tombs of the pharaohs, were the oldest religious texts known to man. These texts helped guide the pharaoh's soul through the afterlife, ensuring that the pharaoh could continue to rule in the divine realm. These pharaohs, with their monumental buildings, vast patronage of the arts, and deep connection to the gods, left a legacy that transcended their lifetimes. The sheer scale of what they built and the stories they told through their art made Egypt a land that could not be ignored. The pharaoh was not just a king. They were the embodiment of Egypt's glory, and their reigns, marked by temples, tombs, and treasures, told the world that Egypt's power would never fade. Each building, each sculpture, and each written word was an act of eternal preservation, ensuring that the pharaoh's name would echo throughout eternity, just as Egypt's monumental structures continue to do today. While military conquest is often associated with the pharaohs, their reigns were just as dependent on diplomacy as they were on the battlefield. Egypt's power extended far beyond its own borders, and this was largely thanks to the pharaoh's strategic alliances, trade negotiations, and keen political maneuvering. Ancient Egypt was perfectly positioned geographically, with its access to the Nile River offering trade routes to the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and through the desert to Nubia and the Levant. This geographic advantage made Egypt a natural hub for international trade and a key player in the ancient world's economy. Egypt's wealth was built not only on the abundant resources found along the Nile, but also on its ability to trade with neighboring empires. The pharaohs were shrewd negotiators, entering into trade agreements that allowed Egypt to export its grain, papyrus, linen, and gold in exchange for valuable goods like cedar wood, ivory, lapis lazuli, timber, spices, precious metals, and even exotic animals from distant lands. These materials were highly prized in Egypt and formed the foundation of its wealth. Egyptian merchants traveled far and wide, bringing back treasures that further elevated Egypt's status in the ancient world. The pharaohs did not only trade for luxury goods. They also depended on foreign alliances to secure resources that were scarce in Egypt. Timber, for instance, was vital for building temples, ships, and palaces, but Egypt was largely devoid of large forests. This led to trade with countries like Lebanon, home to the famous cedar trees. Pharaohs like Hatshepsut sent expeditions to the land of Punt, modern-day Ethiopia or Somalia, to procure incense, exotic animals, and myrrh, highly valued for its use in religious rituals and embalming. The Aegean Sea, along with regions such as Mesopotamia, also played a key role in Egypt's trade networks, with goods flowing in and out through bustling ports, and pharaohs often sought to expand their economic reach by making sure they had control over these trade routes. But it wasn't just about trade in materials. It was about building relationships that would ensure stability and security. Pharaohs used diplomatic marriages, strategic alliances, and cultural exchanges to strengthen Egypt's position and prevent potential conflicts. These royal marriages, often arranged between Egypt and powerful foreign states, were meant to seal agreements and ensure peaceful relations. Egypt was no stranger to sending envoys to other kingdoms and receiving emissaries in return, creating networks of influence and mutual understanding that spanned across the ancient world. By building and maintaining these political relationships, pharaohs not only enhanced Egypt's wealth, but also assured their political dominance in the region. While Egypt's trade relationships were vital to its prosperity, the tribute Egypt received from neighboring kingdoms was perhaps even more telling of Egypt's position in the ancient world. The pharaohs were not just rulers of their own people. They were revered as the supreme monarchs of the ancient world, and many foreign rulers paid tribute to Egypt as a sign of Egypt's unquestionable power and divine rule. This tribute was both a recognition of Egypt's supremacy and a means to maintain peace and favorable relations with Egypt. The Nubian kingdom to the south was one of the first to offer tribute to Egypt, recognizing the pharaoh as the divine ruler of the world. Nubian kings often sent lavish gifts of gold, ivory, exotic animals, and precious stones to the pharaohs in exchange for Egypt's protection and political support. This tribute was a sign of Egypt's dominance, and it allowed Egypt to maintain hegemony over this vital region. But tribute wasn't just about material wealth. It was a political tool that allowed the pharaohs to establish authority over the Nubian kingdom while reinforcing their status as gods on earth. As Egypt's empire expanded, this practice of tribute only grew more pronounced. Canaan, Syria, and even parts of Mesopotamia came under Egypt's sphere of influence, with local rulers regularly sending tribute to the pharaoh in exchange for peace and protection. These tributes often came in the form of grain, livestock, crops, and luxury items, and they were carefully recorded in Egyptian records, often depicted on the walls of temples or monuments, showing the pharaoh receiving tribute from foreign kings as a sign of their divine authority. These scenes were part of Egypt's visual propaganda, reminding the people of Egypt's godlike ruler and Egypt's preeminent position in the ancient world. One of the most significant records of tribute comes from the reign of Ramses II, who boasted that his conquests and political alliances had resulted in massive tribute from distant lands. The Treaty of Kadesh, signed between Ramses II and the Hittite king Mu'attali II, secured the peace between the two empires and reaffirmed Egypt's control over territories that had previously been contested. But it also led to the continued flow of tribute to Egypt, with gifts sent by the Hittites as a symbol of respect for Egypt's power and Pharaoh's position. Perhaps one of the most remarkable examples of tribute in Egypt's history came during the reign of Hatshepsut. Known for her trading expedition to Punt, Hatshepsut received vast quantities of myrrh, frankincense, gold, and wood, all of which were essential for religious and royal purposes. The Punt expedition stands as one of Egypt's most celebrated examples of diplomacy and tribute, where not only was Egypt rewarded with resources, but the pharaoh's diplomatic skills were also put on display. Through diplomacy, trade, and tribute, Egypt was able to project its influence far beyond its borders, ensuring not only military security, but also economic prosperity and cultural influence. Egypt's rulers understood that soft power, the power of alliances, tribute, and cultural exchange, was just as important as military conquest, and they used it wisely to ensure Egypt's dominance in the ancient world. Pharaohs were keenly aware of their global status and ensured that their influence was not limited to just their borders. Cultural exchange was as important as political and economic dominance. Egypt's art, literature, and religion spread across the ancient world, influencing neighboring cultures, and many rulers from foreign lands wanted to be seen as part of Egypt's sphere of influence. Egyptian styles of art, architecture, and religious symbolism can be seen across ancient Mesopotamia, Canaan, and Nubia, marking Egypt's cultural dominance. The pharaohs understood the importance of representation, both to their people and to the world. They knew that their power was as much about perception as it was about actual military might. To ensure Egypt's status as a leading force in the ancient world, pharaohs commissioned artwork and monuments that celebrated not just Egypt's military victories, but also its cultural and diplomatic prowess. Pharaohs did not just conquer. They convinced other kingdoms that Egypt was the center of civilization, that it was the land of divine kingship, and that allegiance to Egypt was a symbol of prosperity and peace. The pharaohs of Egypt were not just the rulers of vast lands and empires. They were visionaries, overseeing the creation of monumental structures, the development of advanced medical knowledge, and the refinement of complex systems that tied Egypt's spiritual beliefs to the heavens. These ancient leaders were involved in some of the most groundbreaking innovations the world had ever seen, and their influence extended far beyond politics and religion. The pharaohs were responsible for transforming Egypt into a land of extraordinary scientific achievement, where architecture, medicine, and astronomy flourished under their rule. Let's start with the architectural and engineering feats that marked the pharaohs as the true pioneers of their time. Pharaohs were patrons of some of the most ambitious building projects in history, and their reigns were defined by the ability to conceive and create monumental structures that still leave us awestruck today. The construction of the pyramids, temples, and obelisks required an understanding of mathematics, engineering, and geometry that was far ahead of its time. The pharaohs didn't just order the construction of these structures. They oversaw every aspect, from the design to the materials to the laborers who would spend years working to bring their grand ideas to life. Take, for example, the Great Pyramid of Giza, which still stands as one of the greatest engineering marvels of all time. Its precise alignment with the cardinal points of the compass, north, south, east, and west, was no accident. It reflected a level of astronomical knowledge that was incredibly advanced for its time. The construction of the pyramid was an intricate process, with massive limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, transported across miles of desert. But the true genius lay in the engineering techniques used to construct such a colossal structure, as well as the mathematics involved in its design. The pi ratio, the angles of the pyramid's sides, and the sophisticated use of geometry were all employed to create a structure that not only stood the test of time, but also reflected Egypt's deep connection to the cosmos. It wasn't just about constructing a tomb for the pharaoh. It was about creating a gateway to the afterlife, a spiritual bridge between the earthly and divine realms. And the innovation didn't stop with the pyramids. The pharaohs were also responsible for the construction of grand temples, like the Temple of Karnak, which served not only as places of worship, but also as symbols of Egypt's political and spiritual power. These temples were architectural masterpieces, designed to showcase Egypt's divine connection to the gods, with each column, statue, and mural carefully crafted to reflect the pharaoh's godlike authority. The obelisks, tall, four-sided pillars with pointed tops, became iconic symbols of Egyptian power, often placed at the entrance of temples to honor the gods and the pharaoh's rule. These monumental structures stood as eternal markers of Egypt's strength and the pharaoh's vision to leave a lasting legacy. But the pharaohs didn't just leave their mark in stone. They also shaped the development of medicine in ways that would be surprising for many. Ancient Egypt was a land of advanced medical knowledge, and the pharaohs played a central role in fostering this understanding. Medical knowledge was considered both practical and spiritual, and the pharaohs ensured that their people had access to the best possible health care for their time. Medical texts, including some of the earliest surgical manuals, were commissioned by pharaohs to preserve and pass on knowledge from generation to generation. Perhaps the most famous figure in Egyptian medicine was Imhotep, the vizier to Pharaoh Djoser, who was not only an architect, but also one of the first recorded physicians in history. Imhotep's medical knowledge was so revered that he was later deified and became associated with healing and wisdom. His work laid the foundation for much of the medical knowledge in Egypt, including the understanding of surgery, anatomy, and dentistry. Pharaohs ensured that medical schools were established and that doctors and surgeons were well trained, creating a system of healthcare that was ahead of its time. The Egyptians were also known for their pharmacology, developing medicines from herbs and plants, and their practices in embalming were so advanced that they became an integral part of Egypt's burial customs, preserving the body for the afterlife. The pharaoh's role in the development of astronomy was another remarkable aspect of their reign. Egypt's connection to the heavens was not only spiritual, it was practical too. The pharaohs played an instrumental role in advancing Egypt's understanding of the stars, the sun, and the moon, using their knowledge to regulate both agriculture and religious rituals. The movements of the stars, especially the star Sirius, were crucial for predicting the annual flooding of the Nile, which brought life to Egypt's agricultural lands. The pharaohs were responsible for maintaining an accurate solar and lunar calendar, ensuring that Egypt's farming activities were perfectly synchronized with the seasons. These calendars were not just for agriculture. They were also tied to Egypt's religious festivals, many of which were based on the positions of the stars and the sun. The pharaohs also used their astronomical knowledge to align their temples and tombs with celestial events. The temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak, for example, was aligned to the solstices, and the Great Pyramids themselves were positioned in such a way that they could be aligned with specific stars in the sky. This wasn't just architecture. It was spirituality in motion, ensuring that the pharaohs were connected to the divine forces of the cosmos, both in life and in death. The astronomical and mathematical knowledge that the pharaohs developed was a crucial part of Egypt's longevity and prosperity, allowing the kingdom to thrive for thousands of years. All of these advancements in engineering, medicine, and astronomy were not isolated events. They were interconnected and influenced by the pharaoh's vision to create a kingdom that was not only powerful, but also in harmony with the gods and the universe itself. The pharaohs didn't just rule over Egypt. They shaped the very fabric of Egyptian life, laying the foundations for future generations of architects, doctors, and astronomers to build upon their incredible legacy. Through their leadership and foresight, they transformed Egypt into a beacon of knowledge and innovation in the ancient world, leaving a legacy that continues to influence us today. The pharaohs of Egypt were not just rulers. They were strategic masterminds in the art of war, shaping the kingdom's military might with a level of organization and logistics that set them apart from many of their contemporaries. The Egyptian military was not simply about leading armies into battle. It was about creating a sophisticated and highly effective military structure that allowed Egypt to dominate its enemies and expand its borders. Pharaohs, as the commander-in-chief, were the central figures in the kingdom's military operations, but their success was built on a foundation of strategic organization that ensured Egypt's military remained strong and effective, no matter what challenges they faced. At the heart of this military power was Egypt's chariotry, one of the most formidable military forces in the ancient world. The chariot, a vehicle pulled by horses, was a symbol of Egyptian military superiority and became one of the most iconic elements of their army. The pharaohs ensured that their armies were always equipped with the latest and most effective technology, and the Egyptian chariotry was a prime example of their military innovation. These chariots allowed soldiers to move quickly across battlefields, strike with speed and precision, and outmaneuver opponents. The chariot divisions were central to Egypt's military strategy, allowing the pharaoh to maintain dominance over neighboring kingdoms and protect Egypt's borders. These chariot forces became the epitome of Egyptian military prowess, with the pharaoh often leading the charge, symbolizing their divine right to rule and protect Egypt. But a powerful army is not just about weapons. It is about organization. The pharaohs ensured that Egypt's military was not only strong in combat, but also highly organized and efficient. They established clear military hierarchies, with generals and officers overseeing various divisions, from infantry to archers to chariotry. Every unit had a specific role and was equipped to fulfill its mission effectively. This level of organization allowed Egypt to maintain a cohesive fighting force, even during lengthy military campaigns far from home. A well-organized army could face challenges from the enemy while keeping its morale and efficiency high, and that was something the pharaohs mastered. But the pharaohs' military power wasn't just about the strength of their soldiers. It was about the ability to supply and sustain those soldiers during long campaigns, sometimes in foreign lands, far away from Egypt's fertile banks. Military campaigns were lengthy, and a soldier's survival depended on the ability to maintain supplies like food, water, weapons, and medical supplies. The pharaohs understood that to win wars, they had to ensure that their army had everything it needed to succeed, and so they developed highly sophisticated military logistics systems that became the backbone of their successful campaigns. Strategically placed roads and fortresses were critical in ensuring that Egypt's military could move swiftly and keep the supply chains intact during long campaigns. These roads connected Egypt's central heartland to distant territories, allowing the pharaoh's armies to march through Syria, Canaan, and even Nubia, maintaining a steady flow of supplies and reinforcements. Egypt's military engineers were experts at building fortresses and military outposts, places where soldiers could rest, regroup, and resupply while on the move. These military bases were strategically placed across Egypt's empire, ensuring that no part of Egypt's territory was left vulnerable, and every soldier had what they needed to remain strong in battle. Of course, maintaining the flow of supplies also meant that the pharaoh's military had to be prepared for long-term engagement. The pharaohs did not simply conquer a region and leave. It was essential that Egypt's military presence be felt long after the battle ended. This was where Egypt's infrastructure came into play. Supply depots were established to store grain, weapons, and tools for military use, and these depots were critical in maintaining the operational readiness of the army. Military commanders worked alongside pharaohs to ensure that these depots were strategically placed and well-stocked, enabling the military to sustain prolonged engagements, especially when faced with resistance or drawn-out campaigns. While pharaohs were often seen as warriors leading their troops to victory, they were also strategic masterminds in protecting Egypt's borders and ensuring its security against outside threats. The defense of Egypt was a vital part of the pharaoh's role as protector of the kingdom. The pharaohs knew that while conquering new lands was important, defending Egypt's borders was just as crucial, and they invested heavily in fortresses and military outposts to protect Egypt from invasion. These fortresses were often located along key trade routes and at the borders, allowing Egyptian soldiers to guard against external threats while maintaining control over Egypt's resources and territory. The Nile River and Egypt's natural barriers of desert acted as powerful defenses, but the pharaohs didn't rely solely on these geographic advantages. They built strongholds and fortresses that serve as military bases, surveillance points, and storage centers, ensuring that Egypt was always prepared for any potential invasion. These fortresses were strategically placed in key regions, such as in the Sinai Peninsula and along the borders with Nubia, to defend against external threats while ensuring the pharaoh's influence was felt across all of Egypt's lands. These military installations were often heavily fortified, with high walls, watchtowers, and well-trained garrisons prepared to defend Egypt from anyone who dared challenge its power. But it wasn't just about protecting Egypt from outsiders. It was also about asserting Egypt's influence over neighboring lands. The pharaohs understood the importance of maintaining control over regions that were vital to Egypt's economy and military strength. This meant that Egypt didn't just defend its borders. It expanded its influence across the ancient world, securing trade routes, ensuring peace, and guaranteeing that Egypt's divine authority was respected by all. In the end, the pharaoh's role in military logistics, strategy, and defense was about ensuring the long-term stability and prosperity of Egypt. Their military campaigns were not just about immediate victories. They were about ensuring that Egypt's power endured for generations to come. From the organized chariot divisions to the well-maintained supply chains, the pharaohs ensured that Egypt's military was always prepared for any challenge, whether on the battlefield or in times of peace. Egypt's fortified borders and military outposts were the first line of defense against invasion, and the pharaoh's ability to build and maintain such a powerful military infrastructure was a key reason why Egypt stood as one of the greatest empires in the ancient world. The pharaohs were not just great conquerors. They were brilliant military strategists who knew that war wasn't just about fighting battles. It was about sustaining power and maintaining control over Egypt's empire through effective organization, logistics, and defense. The pharaohs' military legacy was built on these pillars, and it is through their strategic brilliance that Egypt's influence extended far beyond its borders, leaving a mark on the world that still resonates today. The death of a pharaoh was not just the end of a ruler's life. It was the culmination of a divine journey that transcended the mortal realm, ensuring that Egypt's most sacred and revered figure would live on in the afterlife. Pharaohs believed that their reign would not cease with their death, but that they would continue to rule in the divine realms, just as they had ruled on earth. This belief in immortality and the afterlife was the foundation of their most elaborate and costly rituals, most notably the practice of mummification. The curse of the pharaohs, the mysterious and enduring myth associated with the tombs of Egypt's rulers, emerged in the 20th century following the discovery of the tomb of King Tutankhamun in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter. This myth suggested that those who disturbed the pharaohs' tombs would face misfortune or even death, and it quickly became one of the most sensationalized stories of modern archaeology. The idea of a curse fascinated people around the world, especially when several members of the team involved in the tomb's discovery died under mysterious circumstances. While modern science has largely debunked the notion of a curse, pointing to natural causes like infections from the tomb's microbes or poor health, the allure of this story remains strong. The curse of the pharaohs became a part of popular culture, with movies, books, and documentaries continuing to explore the mystery surrounding King Tut's tomb. But it wasn't just the discovery of a tomb that held mystery. It was the process surrounding a pharaoh's death and what came afterward that truly captivated the imagination of the ancient Egyptians. The pharaohs believed that in order to ensure their immortality and continued reign, they had to undergo the elaborate process of mummification. The goal of mummification was to preserve the pharaoh's body so that their soul could journey safely to the afterlife and continue to rule. The mummification process was a meticulous art that took 70 days and was carried out by skilled embalmers in the royal tombs. The first step in mummification was the removal of the internal organs, starting with the stomach, lungs, liver, and intestines. These organs were preserved in canopic jars, specially designed containers that would safeguard them for the pharaoh's journey into the afterlife. The heart was often left inside the body, as it was believed to be the center of the pharaoh's soul and consciousness. The next crucial step was the drying of the body with natron salts, a mineral that helped remove all moisture, effectively preserving the flesh and preventing decay. This process could take up to 40 days, and during this time, the body would be carefully treated and wrapped in linen. The final stages of mummification involved wrapping the body in layers of linen, which were often treated with resins to further preserve the body and make it airtight. Once the body was sufficiently prepared, it was placed inside a coffin or a sarcophagus, often made of wood, stone, or even gold, depending on the pharaoh's wealth and status. The sarcophagus would then be sealed, ready to be placed in the pharaoh's final resting place. The tomb, often located in grand pyramids or elaborate tombs, built deep inside the Valley of the Kings. This wasn't just a resting place. It was a spiritual transition, a preparation for the pharaoh's continued rule in the afterlife. Pharaohs were also buried with a treasure trove of items to ensure a comfortable afterlife. These included everything from food and furniture to jewels, clothing, and even servants. Yes, the pharaoh's tombs often contained the bodies of servants or animals to accompany the pharaoh in the afterlife, ensuring that the ruler had all they needed in the next world. The belief was that the pharaoh would continue to command the wealth, food, and power they had enjoyed in life, and they would need these items to maintain their status as gods in the afterlife. One of the most fascinating aspects of the pharaoh's tombs is the pyramid texts, one of the oldest religious texts in human history. These inscriptions, often etched into the walls of the pharaoh's tomb, contained spells and prayers designed to guide the pharaoh's soul through the underworld and into the afterlife. These texts describe the pharaoh's journey after death, the challenges they would face, and the divine protection they would receive to ensure their safe passage. The texts were vital to the pharaoh's immortality, as they reinforced the idea that the pharaoh would continue to rule the land of the gods. The end of the pharaohs came in 332 BCE, when Egypt was conquered by Alexander the Great, a Greek ruler who had established the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. The last pharaoh of Egypt was Cleopatra VII, who reigned from 51 to 30 BCE. Cleopatra, perhaps the most famous of all pharaohs, is remembered not only for her political and romantic alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, but also for her efforts to maintain Egypt's independence during a period of growing Roman power. However, with Cleopatra's defeat by Octavian, a future Emperor Augustus, at the Battle of Actium, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire, and the age of the pharaohs came to an official end. While the reign of the pharaohs ended with the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great and the subsequent Roman control, the legacy of the pharaohs remained. The monuments they built, from the Great Pyramids to the temples of Karnak, continued to stand as witnesses to Egypt's glorious past. The pharaohs left behind not just physical structures, but a cultural legacy that would influence the world for centuries to come. Egypt's art, architecture, and religious beliefs continued to captivate generations of rulers, explorers, and scholars long after the pharaohs had passed from the world. Even today, the pharaohs remain a symbol of power and divine rule, their influence still felt in the monuments they left behind and the stories of their reigns. The fascination with the pharaohs' tombs, the curse, and the mysteries of the afterlife continues to inspire exploration and curiosity. The myths and legends surrounding the pharaohs, from the curse of King Tutankhamun to the lavish burials and divine rituals, remain as powerful today as they were in ancient Egypt. The death of the pharaohs was not the end of their story. It was simply the beginning of their eternal legacy. The life of a pharaoh was nothing short of extraordinary. Woven into the very fabric of ancient Egypt's vast and intricate history, pharaohs weren't just rulers in the traditional sense. They were living gods, tasked with maintaining order in both the physical and spiritual realms. From their divine birthright to their monumental death rituals, every aspect of their existence was influenced by the belief that they were destined to bridge the mortal and divine worlds. The pharaoh's role went beyond overseeing Egypt's lands and people. They were spiritual guides, military commanders, diplomats, builders, and even healers. As political rulers, pharaohs orchestrated vast building projects, commissioned monumental structures, and maintained Egypt's dominance over its neighbors, but they also worked tirelessly to ensure their divine connection to the gods was never severed. One of the most awe-inspiring elements of a pharaoh's reign was their commitment to the afterlife. They believed their rule would continue after death, and their preparations were meticulous. From elaborate mummification rituals to the construction of tombs filled with treasures, food, and even servants, the pharaoh's legacy was as much about what they left behind for the afterlife as it was about what they accomplished in the living world. Their temples, pyramids, and monuments weren't just symbols of their reign. They were designed to honor the gods, ensure Egypt's prosperity, and reinforce their immortal status as rulers over both the physical and spiritual realms. Their marriages, too, weren't simply acts of love. They were powerful political alliances that strengthened Egypt's position and ensured the continued purity of the royal bloodline. The pharaohs often took many wives and concubines, and each marriage played a crucial role in maintaining Egypt's stability, ensuring that alliances with neighboring kingdoms were strong and the royal line remained unbroken. Figures like Nefertiti, Cleopatra, and Hatshepsut were not just wives. They were formidable leaders in their own right, often wielding as much power and influence as their husbands. But beyond the politics and grandeur, the life of a pharaoh was also deeply intertwined with religion. They were the high priests of Egypt, leading daily religious rituals and ensuring that the gods were pleased. Whether performing ceremonies at grand temples or overseeing the Opet festival to celebrate Egypt's spiritual unity, the pharaohs were dedicated to maintaining Ma'at, the divine order of the universe. Their every action had a profound effect on the prosperity of Egypt, as maintaining Ma'at was seen as essential for peace, abundance, and protection from chaos. And while the pharaohs were hailed as gods on earth, they were also human beings with families, challenges, and ambitions. Their parenting was directly tied to Egypt's future. The eldest sons were groomed from an early age to take on the mantle of Pharaoh, ensuring the continuation of the dynasty. Despite the immense pressure placed upon them, the pharaohs understood that their legacy would live on through their children, and the careful management of succession was critical to Egypt's enduring power. The military might of the pharaohs was also a cornerstone of their reign. From their elite chariot divisions to their strategic military campaigns across vast territories, pharaohs were not just passive rulers, but active commanders who led their armies to secure Egypt's borders, expand their empire, and collect tribute from neighboring kingdoms. Their leadership in times of war solidified their divine status. Only the God-King could lead Egypt's forces with the strength and divine guidance needed for victory. Yet, it was not just their triumphs on the battlefield or their architectural feats that made the pharaohs great. It was their ability to adapt and evolve. Pharaohs like Ramses II proved that while Egypt could be a warrior state, it could also be a center of diplomacy, forging peace treaties with rival empires and negotiating alliances that ensured Egypt's prosperity in times of peace. As time went on, the reign of the pharaohs eventually came to an end with the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great in 332 BCE and the subsequent establishment of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The pharaohs' era might have ended, but their legacy lives on through their monumental achievements, their influence on the cultures around them, and the awe-inspiring wonders they left behind. The pyramids, the temples, the tombs, all these magnificent structures continue to stand as testaments to their incredible vision, craftsmanship, and ambition. Even in modern times, the legacy of the pharaohs captures the imagination of people all over the world, reminding us of the grandeur and complexity of one of history's most influential civilizations. So, what was life like as a pharaoh in ancient Egypt? It was grand, divine, and filled with unimaginable responsibility. It was a life marked by extraordinary achievements, powerful alliances, and an unwavering commitment to the gods, the people, and the afterlife. The pharaohs may have lived thousands of years ago, but their legacy continues to shape our understanding of ancient Egypt and its lasting influence on the world. If you've enjoyed uncovering the mysteries of Egypt and the fascinating lives of the pharaohs, I'd love to hear what aspect of their reign fascinated you most. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts on this remarkable civilization. If you want to continue exploring the wonders of the ancient world, don't forget to hit subscribe for more stories that bring history to life. Join me on this journey as we uncover the mysteries of the past and bring them into the present. Let's dive into the captivating stories that shaped our world.